presentation today starts to address one of the key questions about whether routinely collected data can be used in place of traditionally collected source data in trials. So our speaker today is Dr Macey Murray. Macey is a Senior Research Fellow in Trial Conduct Methodology at UCL and also a Clinical Trials secondee to NHS DigiTrials. Macey's work that she will be presenting on today won the UK CTU Network Directors Runners-Up Prize for the greatest potential future impact. Without any further ado, I will pass over to Macey. Okay. I've stopped sharing, so hopefully you'll be able to share, Macey.
Thank you for the introduction, Sarah. And yes, so I'm a methodologist in trial conduct, and what I particularly focus on is to improve the efficiency of trials that we run, and my focus in particular is on the use of routinely collected healthcare systems data. And so I'm going to present my work on data integrity of routine healthcare systems data, and there are two projects in particular that I've worked on during my secondment with NHS Digital. And just to say also that I'm funded by the HDR UK in London, and so this has been really helpful for progressing this work that we've been doing. And we initially started our work on data integrity and provenance because we wanted to know if the healthcare systems data we're using in our trials could be considered as source data. And following discussions with NHS Digital, I was then seconded to the DigiTrials programme to learn more about the management of their data. And we formed a collaborative group, including colleagues from the recovery trial at the University of Oxford, Sir Martin Landray and Marion Matham, as well as colleagues at NHS Digital, to co-author a position paper for the MHRA on the process of assessing the integrity of routine data, and in particular, the integrity and provenance of two NHS Digital datasets. And this project began in December 2020 and was completed last autumn. And then the second project I want to tell you about is an ongoing follow-on to this project, again funded by HDR UK, and it's called Dedicate. And I'm going to present that today, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. And please do put any questions in the chat if that's possible. So just want to acknowledge my colleagues at the MRC Clinical Trials Unit who worked with me on this project, as well as those at Oxford and NHS Digital for their valuable insights and support, but also thank you to Michael Chapman and the corporate metadata team at NHS Digital and the staff at MHRA for their constructive feedback during this process. So I'm going to take you through some background on the regulatory context, so, then the purpose of the work and the position paper, and then summarise the assessment process and our findings, and then our conclusions and recommendations. And the NHS Digital has a statutory role to collect, analyse and publish health data, and to provide technical infrastructure to support and improve health and care. And it currently holds over 200 data assets, of which 51 are currently available through their data access request service known as DARS, or through DigiTrials, which is the clinical trials service. And more data sets are to be made available in the future. And HES APC, so that's hospital episode statistics, the admitted patient care dataset. It's a mature and complete dataset of hospital admissions from NHS trusts in England. And the civil registration of deaths, the CRD, it covers all deaths registered in England and Wales. And this comes from the Office for National Statistics. And both datasets are the most widely used routinely collected health data for trial purposes in the UK. So we decided to investigate the integrity and the provenance of these two datasets. Yes.
Sorry, we're having a bit of an issue in the chat. People can't see the slides. Apologies for interrupting.
Okay. I'll do the share again.
Yeah. Thank you. Apologies, everyone.
Is that working now?
I can see the slides. No one's still can't see them. Okay.
Oh. So no one can see the slides at the moment.
I can see them, Macey. I'm not quite sure where other people can. Bear with me. Okay.
This says your shared screen can be seen only by hosts and co-hosts. So is there something to do with the setting for the
It could be. Bear with us 2 seconds.
Participants can now see your screen, it's saying.
Okay. Can everyone see them now? I think we're getting yes.
Yes.
But
thank
you. Apologies, technical.
Oh, I'm really sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Oh dear, I'm so sorry about that. So I was just saying about these two NHS digital data sets and why it was we chose to look at the integrity of these two in particular, because they're the most widely used in trials in the UK. So before I talk about integrity, let me tell you a bit more about, you probably all know about health data, but why on earth do we want to be using healthcare systems data in our trials? So this sort of data has been used for decades in clinical research, mostly for observational studies. And I certainly, during my PhD, used primary care data in observational studies. So how come only recently has healthcare systems data been used in trials? Well, this is mainly due to quite stringent clinical trials regulations, but current digital innovation has enabled these data to be used more in trials. And we know that there's an intention to use them much more in trials from various publications that have been that have shown that when trials applied for ethics approval, a good proportion of them are intending to use routine data. And we have excellent examples of trials that have benefited from their use, such as the recovery and principle trials. So what in particular are the advantages of using this type of data, especially bearing in mind the difficulties that I've heard from many trialists about accessing data? Why should we go to so much trouble? So in an ideal world, if we're assured that the data sets are high quality and suitable for use in trials, then sponsors can use healthcare systems data as trial data. And this might even aid simpler data collection. Maybe the data will be more complete. It might be more efficient and less costly, especially for those large multi-centre trials. And for investigators, it's a reduced burden on site staff, because they can focus instead on patient care and maybe collection of patient-reported outcomes instead of the normal trial outcomes on case report forms. And for data providers, that documentation allows their data sets then to be used in clinical trials. And for the public, this means that then trials can maybe even be run more efficiently through the use of these centralised national data sets. And then this can support innovation and research and development of better treatments in a more timely manner. So just to give you some background about regulatory sort of context, the MHRA published the first two guidance documents in their series on using real-world data in December 2021 after public consultation. And it's an important document as it recognises the value of real-world data sets like those held by NHS Digital and others in generating real-world evidence. And the purpose of the series is to encourage sponsors to use real-world data more. But, and rightly so, MHRA states that the real-world data, so the healthcare systems data, must be demonstrated to be of sufficient quality. And so the section on data quality asks a series of questions about the real-world data set. So this covers the representativeness of the database population, the contemporaneity, the completeness, validity, the handling of changes in data collection, etc. And this seems to all feed into one paragraph on data quality in the guidance. And I've reproduced it here and added my own emphasis in bold. So it states that sponsors should include in the study protocol a description of the tools and methods for selection, extraction, transfer and handling of data, and how they have been or will be validated. And it's essential that processes are established to ensure the integrity of the data from acquisition through to archiving, and sufficient detail captured to allow for the verification of these activities. And it's expected that the validity of the real-world data that are intended to be used in the study is formally documented and approved by the sponsor before the study protocol is published or submitted to the MHRA. So this seems quite straightforward. We document how the data are extracted, etc., and the tools used, and show how the processes ensure the integrity of the data. But as you read more of the guidance, the validity of the data also needs to be assessed. So how valid or relevant are the data for the outcomes of interest? And this needs to be shown on a trial-by-trial basis. And MHRA suggests feasibility studies to assess validity. And we currently at the unit have a number of studies that we're running to assess the validity of NHS digital data. So in particular for the outcomes of death, serious cardiovascular events, and for cancers. And we call these comparison SWOTs. So it's comparison studies within a trial, where we compare trial data against the healthcare systems data for key outcomes. So while it's good to see that MHRA is acknowledging the value of real-world data, there is still quite a bit of work for us to do to be allowed to use them in our trials. So we are expecting the revision 3 of ICH E6 on good clinical practice to incorporate more guidance on the use of healthcare systems data, as the draft principles published in April 2021 show that there's a growing acceptance of different data sources used in trials for regulatory submission, including the secondary use of healthcare systems data. And the principles have incorporated this flexibility to allow for and encourage innovation. But the key principles of good clinical practice endure, and that's to protect trial participants and ensure the reliability of trial results. And there is an expectation that sponsors demonstrate data integrity as well as reliability of the trial data. So in recognition of these different data sources, the European Medicines Agency published their data quality framework for medicines regulation for consultation last month, so that's October, with the purpose of enabling regulators to make reliable data quality assessments of data used in trials and safety studies. So it's worth a read of this. I've put a link here and I'll send the slides around later, hopefully that you will be able to get hold of them. But just to note that this framework, the consultation for this framework, it closes in a couple of days' time. So do have a look, and it might be worth you sending some feedback to them as well, if you're interested in this particular area. So just to summarise, trial sponsors need to demonstrate to regulatory authorities that all data, including healthcare systems data, are integral, reliable and complete. And to have oversight of all trial data, sponsors need to have assurances about the provenance of the data in their trials. So this is the detailed records of the origins, processing and the methods used to produce it, as well as the integrity, so the extent to which it's complete, consistent, accurate and reliable. And as part of their oversight, sponsors normally review source data for quality control and reliability. So what should sponsors do when they use healthcare systems data? So we know that source data is defined as the original records or a certified copy of original necessary for evaluation and reconstruction of a trial. And they should follow the Alcoa principles of being accurate, legible, contemporaneous, original, attributable and complete. And Alcoa Plus includes these qualities as well as consistent, enduring and available. However, when we looked at Alcoa Plus and tried to apply that to our healthcare systems data, we found it wasn't suitable because, and therefore, healthcare systems data can't be considered as source data. And one of the reasons was because source data shall only be modified with the knowledge or approval of the investigator. But we know that hospital episode statistics, HES data, they're processed centrally at NHS Digital, away from the investigator's control. So we decided to find another approach to assess the data set shaped by the MHRA's GXP Data Integrity guidance, which I'll tell you about now. So MHRA publishes guidance back in 2018, and it adopts a risk-based approach to data management, and it covers data integrity risk, criticality in the data lifecycle, and it states that systems must be documented, showing acceptable controls through the data lifecycle. So it's similar to the MHRA real-world data guidance. And they also use Alcoa Plus, but then there's an emphasis on data governance measures to ensure that data are complete, consistent, and so on. And so our position paper to the MHRA on data integrity and provenance of these two data sets, this was published in February 2022 on the Zenodo platform. And this is a 50-page report, so quite a long read. But we published also a short commentary summarising what we did and what we found in the Lancet Digital Health in July's edition. So do have a look if you haven't already done that. And just to now tell you about the purpose of the position paper, this was to demonstrate that the integrity of two sets of healthcare systems data So these are the HES APC and the CRD, the registration of deaths, can be considered suitable for trial use. So they're either considered source data or high quality transcribed data. And to show that our approach to ascertain data integrity can be similarly applied to other healthcare data. And so our assessment process was based on mainly on the data integrity guidance, but also on the change in the ICH E6 guidance. And it aims to assess the documentation of the tools, systems and controls, and as well as the lineage and access requirements. And at the time, because there wasn't an established procedure for assessing integrity, we decided to document and review 3 key stages of the life cycle. So collection, processing and curation, and linkage and extraction. And the data architects at NHS Digital refer to these stages as submission, production and releasable. And the intention was to cover the tools, etc., in the process of our qualitative assessment and review. And please note that this paper covered solely the management of the data within NHS Digital and partially within ONS. So all that's within NHS Digital's control. So any issues around the purpose of the data collection or the validity or utility of the data, was out of scope for the paper. These are valid questions to ask about the data, but we didn't address them here. So this is a schematic showing you the key stages of the data lifecycle. And here I've used the HES APC as the example here. So here on the left-hand side, you can see orange, this is the hospital system. And this is where the collection or the abstraction from the healthcare provider happens. And there's an automated extract called the commissioning data set. And this comes from the hospital patient administration system. So it's extracted using XML, and there's business standards, and it's automated. And there's, as you can see, the original audit trail remains in the hospital system, but this file then it lands in the secondary use service database at NHS Digital. And then some validations and quality checks by the data quality team are run on the data, and there might be some queries, some further information required, or some corrections need to be made. So then that gets sent back to the hospital, and then in theory, another extract, commission data set extract that's been corrected, may be sent through back into SUS+, and then the data then flows through further into NHS Digital. So that's where the collection part happens. And then the processing and curation, this is where there are further validations, derivations, and transformations within AHAS, which then, so that's the acute hospital analytical system. And then this becomes HES monthly or HES annual, which is a fixed data set. And depending on the time of the year it's being processed, it might be the annual or it might be the monthly. And then eventually it lands into the DAR system, where it then can be linked and extracted. So linkage to a specific cohort list, and then extracted and provided to the users. So this schematic I also want to show you, shows you the similarities between how trial data and NHS Digital data are processed. And in the paper, I write about these parallels between these life cycles, about using HES APC in particular, and that of trial-specific collected data. And it's this particular schematic that convinced the MHRA that NHS Digital data, in particular the HES APC, are a high-quality transcribed copy of the original source data, so equivalent to trial data. So here at the bottom, you can see this is in purple. This is what happens in the trial space. So we have a trial database. Trial case report forms are completed either through electronic data capture or on paper forms, and requires human intervention, where the data from the hospital system or patient notes is extracted and then put into these case report forms. And then this is entered into the trial database. And then again, we have validations or query generation. The queries go back to the hospital, and then the research nurses or practitioners amend the data, and it goes back into the trial database. And this cycle might go on for a while until the data is considered clean and then there's database lock. And then you have the analysis, a final analysis. And this is where you might see some of the routine data feeding in either here or here into the trial database. So just to note the difference between the two systems, though, is that there's an automated extract here, whereas here this is requires transcription by human intervention. So it's not as reliable as the XML extract here. So in the paper, we describe the details of each of the 3 key stages in HES APC and civil registration of deaths, CRD. So here, I'm not showing you the detail of it, but I want to show you the amount of information we collected as evidence at each stage. So this is all the tools, systems, controls, data flow, etc. And the same here for the civil registration of deaths as well. And what we could conclude after reviewing the evidence was that both HES APC and CRD are integral data sets. And we know that both data sets are handled robustly. They have appropriate controls and automation to ensure their quality for secondary uses, including in trials. And so we've made some recommendations. So from our documentation, we could confirm the integrity of the data sets and that they are recognised as equivalent to a transcribed copy of the original source data and should be considered suitable for use as trial data. And this means that no source data verification is required on these data when used in trials. And we recommend that sponsors instead prioritise processes that support access and use of healthcare systems data, including clear documentation in their trial master file of their justifications for using specific healthcare data sets. And this characterisation of the data lifecycle provides a template for other data providers to follow, and we strongly recommend that such assessments of data integrity are made public for transparency and for the trials community. We also want to see data providers address any issues that arise concerning the integrity of their data if they go through this process, and we called for this in our commentary in Lancet Digital Health. And we know that our characterisation of these data sets as being integral and reliable has influenced the MHRA guidance on real-world data, as it specifically gives these 2 data sets as examples. So they didn't credit us with this, but they added this in after consultation with our group. So they've added here that all-cause mortality and inpatient hospitalisations are known to be well recorded in the UK general population. So now I want to move on and change track now to tell you a little bit more about a project that's ongoing. It's about to finish. That's been funded by the Health Data Research UK Directors Innovation Fund. And I'm the lead of this particular project. It's called Dedicate, so Demonstrate Data Integrity for Clinical Trials. And we started this project in June. We plan to finish it by hopefully the end of the year and finish the write-up by March next year. And I provided presented a version of this at the recent International Clinical Trials Methodology Conference, which Sarah mentioned earlier. And just to give you some background, well, you've already heard that trial sponsors need to demonstrate that all data are integral, reliable, and complete. And we've demonstrated that the 2 data sets are suitable for use in trials, equivalent to a transcribed copy of the original source data. So the aims of this particular project was to use a data intelligence platform known as Calibra to record the integrity and provenance of NHS digital datasets. So it includes the 2 that we originally looked at, the HES APC and the CRD, but we added to this the outpatients and the critical care datasets of hospital episode statistics. We also wanted to semi-automate this process where possible in an NHS Digital Central Metastore, thereby producing this single source of truth about their data. And we also wanted to develop an operating manual so the provenance and integrity of other datasets can be recorded in the Metastore. And the aim was that the learning around this will enable NHS Digital's corporate metadata team to provide detailed information about provenance and integrity to trialists and sponsors who use such datasets in their trials. And that it allows trialists to know more about where the data has come from, what happens to it within NHS Digital, and it gives us confidence in their reliability. And so we use very simple, it seemed quite simple here, methods, but these are our methods. So we wanted to gather the dataset information from NHS Digital, So within the organisation, this includes a logical data dictionary, rules at each stages of submission, production, releasable. So the three key parts of their life cycle. And then to use Calibra to ingest that information into this central Metastore to form complete data models. And this includes the business rules and processing, any validation, etc. And then to develop data lineage diagrams in the Metastore. So this will provide information on the provenance and integrity to those internally in NHS Digital, but also to users, so the trials community and regulators. And this is the summary of NHS Digital's vision for the central Metastore. So it's this centralised single source of truth about NHS Digital. And it's hugely beneficial to the organisation as it holds all over 200 data assets, and some are very old, some are quite new in development. So having this central Metastore enables national governance of the data. So there's an umbrella view of all the data. You can see what items are common, etc. And it provides a rich information about the data products to users as well as internally to NHS Digital folk through the catalogue views. And this is what this project hopes to build on, as well as supporting the corporate governance of data by quality assuring designs of data sets. So this gives you a view of the central Metastore. I appreciate it's really tiny font here for you to all see, but I hope it gives you a flavour of the information that's captured. So here in this first column, we have a searchable area, which this lists different data items. So you can search in here, as here it says area, and it's come up with all the items in the catalogue that have area in the name of it. And it also provides a brief description here in the next column. But if you were to click into the item area of work name, that will give you a much more detailed description of the data, where it comes from, etc. And then in the next few columns, so here you can put tags, but in particular, it tells you what type of data asset it is. Is it a data attribute, something else? Is it a data set? And here, this describes where that particular data item might be in terms of data sets. So data sets that are using that data. And then it tells you in the next column where it's mapped to, the physical column that's mapped to. So here you can see it says area team of residents, but over here in this column, it's AT_residents. That's how it's described in the actual data set. So it's quite a valuable tool. At the moment, there's over 10,000 items in the Metastore. So there's an awful lot of information that's being captured already, which is really useful. And so far, our project is on track to deliver the lineage by December 2022 and make this information available by next spring to people. And we have completed this ingestion of HES APC and CRD, and we're almost there with the other two data sets. And the operating manual that we've drafted during the HES APC work, this has been revised for each additional data set. We now have a really good version that will form the basis of our methods paper. And then just to say again about being runner-up for the UK CTU Network Directors Award for Greatest Potential Future Impact. And so that was a bit of a shock and I was slightly embarrassed. But yeah, it just shows how important that this piece of work is for supporting clinical trials in the future. So here, just to show you some of the content of the Metastore, this is a simplified data flow. So the lineage of HES APC. So you can see this is quite similar to what I've shown you a few minutes ago. On the left-hand side, this is a hospital system. There is a commissioning dataset extract. And here we've got ethnic category. We're just following that through. It lands in SUS Plus within NHS Digital in their warehouse. And then it maps across to the AHAS, and then another AHAS where it's processed and eventually becomes a fixed HES, which is then made available through the data access environment, which is the TRE at NHS Digital. So I hope you can see that this follows quite similarly to the earlier diagram I showed you. And this is the view. We hope to make this view much more user-friendly. Here you can't see the rules for transformations or derivations, which, as you can see here, this makes the diagram a lot more complicated. So the business rules and the validations they're in green and blue here, as you can see. So it's quite a complex diagram. So part of what we want to do next is to look at user testing, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So there were 2 points of discussion from this particular work. Automation, we can't actually, it's not fully automated, it's a semi-automation that we have here, because we have to ingest information from spreadsheets. And then this allows the data relationships to be graphically generated within the Metastore. And the definitions and the processing rules may be used for building new pipelines and extracts. And we know that when we ingested the HES APC, there were a lot of common rules with HES outpatients and HES critical care. So we were already reusing some of these rules and processing. So the benefits of using this tool is that NHS Digital has a huge number of assets, but once the information is ingested in the Metastore, this improves the data governance and also adds transparency to users. And then the second point is about consistency. So, when I showed you my methods slide, it looked very easy. We gathered the information, but actually we found that was the most time consuming part. And it involved contacting lots of different teams within the organization. And bearing in mind, some data sets are decades old. So we need, it's hard to find some of this information. So we need to start this phase as early as possible. And it highlights that information must be recorded consistently and centrally where possible. So for other data providers who aren't in a position to use a tool such as Calibra, having it all centrally collated somewhere, the metadata and the lineage information, and making sure you're recording it consistently and in an accessible manner, then makes it easier to input it into a template later on. So consistency in record keeping is absolutely vital here. So just a couple of things about our next steps. So the user testing, as you saw from the diagrams, they can be quite complicated to understand. So is this what trialists need to know and record in their trial master files about the data they use? We want volunteers who regularly use NHS digital data or any other type of data to review the content of these diagrams and the catalogue. And also, this is what regulators need to see when they audit trials. So we do plan to liaise with MHRA and other regulators to ensure the level of documentation is appropriate for our trials. And we also want to make this information accessible to users. So potentially it could be accessed through the HDR Innovation Gateway, who already provide the metadata and information on data utility. So it seems like a logical place to place it. And also via NHS Digital's web pages, we hope to make this information available. And we also plan to work with HDR in the future to collaborate with and train other data custodians to assess their data assets for integrity and make that information available. So we've already started that process with CPRD. They've started that a couple of months ago, and we'd really like to support others to do similar work. So do get in touch if you know others or you are a data provider yourself interested. So just the last thing to say was to thank my collaborators and my CTU colleagues for the input, especially to the metadata team at NHS Digital. And please get in touch with me if you want to be involved in user testing. I'm really happy to take questions now. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Macey. That was really good. Okay, so we are now open for questions. You can either raise your hand or put questions in the chat. I'm going to start off with one though. So what other steps are required to use these data sets to replace trial data?
Oh, wow. I think to answer that question, I'm going to take you back to a slide because it's quite a long answer. There are loads of things, not just about integrity. So this guidance here, so this is from the MHRA, they say specifically about not just the integrity, but the validity. So those are two really key aspects, but then there's also the area of access and retention. So before we can even use the data in a trial, we need to be able to access it easily. And as we know, a lot of people know, it can be very sort of quite a long drawn out process and quite painful. So, you know, I've had lots of people rant and rave at me about how hard it can be. So one of the key roles I have in my unit is to actually help other trial teams to access data from different bodies. So if anyone wants some advice about how to do that, then, you know, I'm happy to help. We also ran a workshop at ICTMC on using routine data in trials, and one of the key subjects was about data access, and we actually went through a fake data access request to try and teach people how, you know, what is required. So I could talk about data access for a long time. Yeah, I shouldn't really, because
that's a big area.
It's a big area, and it will railroad the whole question, my answer to the rest of the question. So I talked about integrity. I also talked about validity. So these comparison studies within a trial we're doing are to check. So, for instance, for a hard outcome such as death, it's easy to be able to compare against trial data the deaths that are recorded, because you can take the civil registration of deaths data, know that it's good quality data because I've demonstrated that in terms of integrity, and then you can compare it with your trial data to see are you collecting all the same information, so the dates of death, the same, the cause of death. Also, are you getting all of the dates of death in, or are there some missing? Maybe the routine data will give you more information because you might have missed some. Certainly because of COVID, you know, there are a lot of hospitals downed tools for research, and so a lot of trials are closed, and so it all suspended for a bit. So actually some of these deaths might not have been reported when they should have been, and we have found that from preliminary analysis of one of our trials. So, you know, it's checking that validity, you know, can that death registration information actually be collected instead of collecting trial data, you know, through the trial, the research units in hospitals, or, you know, the GP practices. So if we can do that, then that will, you know, eliminate that need. And the less that we require of our sites to have to collect information, fantastic. It just means that they can focus on the really important outcomes that maybe aren't in routine data.
Absolutely.
And then the final thing is retention. Can we keep that data? In order to be able to, you know, can we share it with others once we've collated it from, you know, from the data providers? That again is a problem because there's a legal issue there. So, you know, there are quite a few barriers, but we are trying to solve them, and we are bit by bit. And I'm sure Matt Sides often talks about these things, but we are making progress slowly, and hopefully surely.
Absolutely. I think it's a large collaborative effort.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to ask Sean. He's got a hand up there from NICE. Sean.
Oh, you're on mute. Can't hear you. No, can't hear you.
Oh.
No, I wonder if we can Sean, can you put it in the chat, or have you put it in the chat already?
Oh, I think Sean's going to put his question in the chat.
Are there any other questions? Must be other questions.
Anyone else? See how fast Sean can type. Oh, any other questions? Macey, I might have another one while we're waiting on Sean. So,
okay.
Is there any other data providers that you mentioned you were looking at going through the same process with other custodians? Would that be in the UK or also international? Is there any consideration for international data custodians?
Yeah, so Matt and I met with a group in Canada last week. and they would like to embark on this process as well. They don't have such a sophisticated tool such as Calibra, but they certainly want to be able to map out, their data lineage, so they can, and then check the integrity of their data, have it, recorded in a way systematically that then allows their data to be used in trials. So yeah, they're doing that. And then there's the CPRD, which some people may know it as previously as GPRD. And like it's a data set quite close to my heart because I did my PhD using the data. But they have embarked on this process as well. So they're within the UK, and it's because they have some data-enabled trials that they're running. I think they're running 2 at the moment. So they feel the need that they have to record that provenance of their data at least. So I've been helping them with a bit of that too. But the more the merrier. If we could do that for more data sets, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
It'd be really good.
Yeah, it'd be really good.
I think we've got Sean's question now. It says, you have mentioned about engagement with MHRA. What has your engagement been like with NICE? And I think he's got plugged this year. We've published our RWD framework, which included the data sat, which is a data suitability assessment tool,
okay.
which is in the chat if anyone wants the link there as well.
Oh, thank you for that link. That's brilliant. I haven't actually been involved with NICE at all. So yeah, I think probably because NICE are a bit further down the line than in that, we have to do our trials and then develop the evidence, and then NICE then come along. So that's probably why. So I'm kind of further back in the pipeline in terms of, producing evidence. But I will definitely have a look at that framework. That sounds really good. And it'd be lovely to have a chat as well, a bit more about what you've been doing.
Great. Okay, that's 12:45. If anyone's not got any more questions, is there any other questions? Last chance. Okay, well, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming along, and thank Macey for a really, really great talk. So as I said earlier on, the webinar has been recorded and it will be up on our YouTube channel shortly. And thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. And thanks again, Macey.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.